Can I welcome people to this Marxism meeting? My name is Naila Ashraf. I'm a member of the SWP from the Manchester branch. We've got an absolutely fantastic meeting lined up. We've got some fantastic international speakers for this meeting on resisting the far right and fascism in Europe. Just to let people know how we're going to run the meeting, I'm going to introduce each speaker and they're going to speak for a designated amount of time. And then once all three of them have finished, we will then open up the floor for contributions, for questions or anything people would like to discuss. And obviously at that point, we just get people to indicate and I'll call them one by one. I am going to just explain that we are recording this meeting, both the audio and video. So I'm going to ask people when they do contribute to come to the front of the hall and speak in the mic, so that everybody else in the room can hear it, but also that the recording is picked up. If anybody does not want to be filmed when they make their contribution, please just indicate and we'll make sure the video is switched off. So I'm going to ask people, if you have got spaces, seats next to you, if you can just indicate, because there are people looking for seats. This is where all the gaps come in, isn't it? All right, I think we're fine. Okay, so I'd like to start the meeting. Our first speaker is David Albrich. He's a leading member of Turn Left from Austria, and he's also the coordinator of the Humane Asylum Policy. David, if I'm going to get you to speak from there. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Chair. Comrades, we are living through quite some crazy times. We have the fascist Freedom Party in Austria in government. And at the same time, I tell you some big news, if you haven't heard. Last Saturday, 120,000 people took to the streets against the 12-hour working day, against the fascists in government. This was the massive demonstration after they took office in December. The working class in Austria declared that for years is awakening. In the last 2 weeks, we saw 1,500 work assemblies taking place all over in Austria. Last Monday morning, public transport workers held a warning strike and 250 trains had to be cancelled. This is massive compared to what we saw over the last years in Austria. And how did we get there? I want to argue that the trigger for the trade unions, the big demo that was called by the Trade Union Federation from above, this was motivated from above. They had to mobilize because the trade union leaders were afraid that they would lose their negotiating mandate, so they had to mobilize their base. This is not the other way around, that this was part of what the radical left was doing. But this movement converged with the anti-fascist and the anti-racist movement building up over the last years, especially over the last months since the elections in October. And I will get to highlight you some kind of impression what we did. 2 days before the election in October, we from Turn Left called a demonstration called Fuck Strache. Fuck Strache. Strache, he is the leader of the fascist party. We had a protest on the day of the election. Immediately after the results came in, 1,000 people came to the protest, and the best activists came to the protest that built up the movement against the government of the Tories and the fascists afterwards. We had 10,000 people on the streets on the inauguration day in December. And the platform, I'm the coordinator, the platform for Humane Asylum Policy called for a massive demonstration under the slogan against racism and against social cuts in the beginning of January, where 70,000 people took to the streets. We then took part in the International Day Against Racism in March, where we again had 8,000 people welcoming refugees, saying no to Islamophobia. On the World Refugee Day, just 2-3 weeks ago, we had again 5,000 people protesting against racism. And I mentioned the protest we did, Fuck Strache. I'm very welcome that I can tell you that in February we won the court trial against the Freedom Party leader Strache because he sued us, because we say to him, fuck Strache, and we showed him the middle finger. And if you are interested, after the meeting, I would ask you to send a message to Heinz Christian Strache here from Marxism 2018, and you can all participate in showing him the middle finger and 2 fingers, yeah. Okay. It is this anti-fascist and anti-racist movement that can really shape the social movements, can shape the trade union movement. We have to intervene politically in all these movements against the government. After the big trade union demo last Saturday, the leader, Strache, of the Freedom Party, posted a picture of a woman holding a sign of our platform poster where we said, I show you, we said, yes to the culture of welcoming refugees and no to the 12-hour working day. And the leader of the Fascist Party posted the picture comparing us with the Knights of the Sad Countenance of Cervantes' Don Quixote. It was quite a compliment. Thank you. And it's this anti-fascist and anti-racist movement that stopped the fascists when they wanted to take to the streets over the last years. We beat the fascist Freedom Party in 2016 when they tried twice, 2 times, mobilizing against refugee centers and building up a fascist street movement. We beat the identitarian movement, the fascist street movement, driven them out of the big cities. And this is why we have the slogan in Turn Left, don't let Nazis govern and never let them have the streets. And I think there are some important lessons that we can learn from the Austrian experience, because it's the first time now since long that the fascists are part of a government, like we have the fascist party in government in Italy. So there are more general points that could be made in the discussion. The Freedom Party, as we see it, acts as a chain dog for the Conservative Party, for the neoliberal right. When they campaigned in the election, they promised that not one stone will be left upon the another. And if the Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, from the Conservatives, want to succeed, he has to constantly serve his right-wing voters and the right-wing voters also of the Freedom Party. He has to continue to heat up the racist and xenophobic mood and to confront his opponents. Inside Parliament and outside Parliament, he uses the brutality and the ruthlessness of the Freedom Party. Just take the announcement of the Freedom Party Minister of Interior, Herbert Kickl, in January, when he said he wants again to concentrate migrants. Okay, this is what actually happens now. They are delivering. They are erecting again concentration camps in Africa, and they are discussing erecting concentration camps on the border from Germany to Austria. The Austrian economist Friedrich August von Hayek, the role model for the neoliberal era, once wrote that sometimes you need coercion where there's no voluntary conformity. And one Vienna-based scientist, Gabriele Michalic, argues that this is where the authoritarian movement of neoliberalism converges with the understanding of society by the right-wing radicalism. They use the fascist party for the neoliberal agenda, for austerity, for introducing a 12-hour working day. And in return, the fascists get their rehabilitation. This is a real danger. They can build up their fascist core, recruit, change the climate, where a real fascist street movement can grow. It's not just that they are the tool of the conservatives, they also have their own agenda that it's not immediately up on the table now. And one of the FPÖ politicians, high-ranking FPÖ politicians, Elmar Podgorszek, he made a speech to the AfD in Germany not long ago, where he talked quite openly what their agenda is in government, and I think it's very important to look at these points. First, what they are doing is trying to take over the ministries, the cabinet, state firms, and those firms close to the state. It's often the core of the Freedom Party, the so-called German nationalist Burschenschafter, very right-wing fascist student corporations that took over the boards, that took over the ministries and the cabinets. And this is very different from the first participation of the fascists in government since 2000. They are sending their hardcore Nazis into the ministries. And not just any ministries, they have the deep state. They have the Ministry of Interior, they have the Ministry of Defense. Secondly, they want to turn over the judiciary. They sent this Burschenschafter to the constitutional court, the highest court, and they have now 9 out of 14 judges belonging to the government parties. The third point, they want to paralyze the intelligence service, the constitutional protection, as it called in Austria. The Freedom Party they pushed actually witnesses from the intelligence service to testify against other members of the intelligence service, and then led a crackdown in the intelligence service. They sent a special police task force that is led by a FPÖ politician to ramp up the intelligence service. And this unit is known for its racist practices on the streets, where they're so-called, what they're doing is bashing Negroes. The fourth point I want to make, or Podgorszek, the politician of the FPÖ, is made. They infiltrate the police and military and recruit members to the party. The FPÖ is doing policy, especially for the police. They are recruiting now 4,000 new police officers, and the Minister of Interior is placing advertisements in racist, anti-Semitic magazines that are really read by neo-Nazis. They are recruiting neo-Nazis to the police and trying to get them nearer to the party to put up their fascist core. Fifth point, they want to control the media and intimidate journalists. Podgorszek said, we must absolutely neutralize public broadcasting, even if this means that they blame us for urbanization. And many journalists already have been attacked. Sixth point, they found new media. They are already launching WhatsApp and Twitter and all that stuff, and they're funding also these right-wing anti-Semitic neo-Nazi magazines with 29,000 euros since they took office. Seventh point, they have to remain their image of a so-called anti-establishment force, and this means that they also have to distance themselves from the Conservative Party. This is very much like what Trump is doing, and this means propping up racism and against Muslims and refugees. This is sum up. Okay, sum up. To sum up, yesterday a paper was leaked. You know, the Austrian government now is leading the presidency of the European Union for the next half a year. And yesterday a paper was leaked that the Austrian government plans to eradicate the right for asylum, that you cannot apply for asylum in Europe anymore. Refugees are not the danger. The danger, the rise of the far right, the danger is more brutal racism against Muslims and refugees. The danger lies in the Mediterranean for refugees because of Fortress Europe. The real danger lies in the neoliberal attacks on the working classes of Europe. So our slogan is, open the borders, and the more refugees are in, the less Nazis we have.
Thanks for that. Our next speaker is Christine Buchholz. She's a German MP for the Die Linke Party. She's a long-term anti-racist activist and a supporter of Marxist 21.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Comrades, I bring you warm greetings of the German anti-racist movement. So we brought on the streets last Friday 12,000 people against the EU Fortress Europe and for a humane asylum policy. We brought 6,000 people on the streets of Augsburg, a city in Bavaria where the party conference of the AfD took place 1 week ago. And we brought on the streets of Berlin 70,000 people in the end of May to face and to confront the AfD. And I think this is a very, very important development in the German political landscape. And it's necessary because political constellations in Germany are changing very quickly. Like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined that we have such a big right-wing party with fascists in it in Germany. I saw it in France and Austria elsewhere, but I couldn't imagine to have this in Germany. And it's now the first time in German history since World War II that a far-right party entered the Bundestag. The AfD won 12.6% in the 2017 election, and this is a growth of 7.9% from the 4 years before. The AfD was founded in 2013 as a mainly anti-EU party, and it had, of course, racism in its program, but it was a mainly right-wing anti-EU party. A mixture of neoliberal right-wing professors, right-wing populists, and also some fascists. But since then, the AfD radicalized massively from year to year. Party leaders left because it went too far to the right, and the fascist wing of the party grew. And it's now, the best organized wing inside the AfD, the most dynamic wing of the party. The AfD has failed to expel the open Nazi Björn Höcke. He called the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin a memorial of shame. The AfD failed to expel an open anti-Semitic parliamentarian, Wolfgang Gedeon, and the AfD is building systematically links to the organized neo-Nazi scene, the identitarian movement, and other organized Nazis far to the right, even to the AfD. And even though this is quite clear, it's quite clear what's happening at the moment, and if we look to Austria, we can see the result. There's a kind of normalization of the party. They have a high media coverage. They are invited to talk shows, and there's many journalists, many mainstream media don't talk about fascists. They talk about right-wing liberals and national conservatives in the party, and we are stressing, yes, the party is not a fascist party as a whole. We have national conservative on it, but we have a growing number and more influenced fascists. The difference between different wings of the party is that some of them are openly wanting to go to a government together with the CDU. But the national, the fascist wing is quite open that they are going for the strategy of a national revolution and to build the links to the working class. They are putting on a more national socialist agenda to build links with the working class. This is the development we see. What the dangerous thing in the moment is that they are developing and that the others, in a way, are adopting their racism and their anti-refugees demands. The Minister of Interior, Horst Seehofer, a guy from Bavaria, he's like our Trump. He demanded to close the borders to Austria against the will of Angela Merkel, who doesn't want to close the German borders to Austria, but to close the EU borders to keep migrants outside. It's important to say that Angela Merkel is not the friendly face of the welcome culture anymore. She wasn't, to be honest, never this, but she more and more adopted this right-wing politics. And now the Merkel and the SPD agreed to build prison-like camps for refugees and send those back immediately to other European countries that have been registered there. So the anti-refugee and anti-Muslim racism is taken over by others, and this is a disaster. This is a disaster for migrants and Muslims because the mood in society is getting more hostile towards them. And of course, it doesn't weaken the AfD as it is giving it new confidence. So the AfD now, so they won 12.7% in the last election 1 year ago. Now they're at 16% in the polls. Plus 4%. And this is the impact of the politic shifting to the right and adopting the AfD demands. And even within the left party, we have a debate on migration. Sarah Wagenknecht is the leader of the parliamentary group, and she has a very high popularity in the society. And at the day of the election, the evening of the election, she went to the media and spoke to the television cameras that the left has to rethink its migration politics. And it's naive to talk about open borders. And I think this is a false answer to the threat of the right. She thinks that we have just to pose a social alternative to Merkel, and this is the key to push back the far right. But I think this is wrong. We have to connect the fight against racism, the fight for open borders, with a social struggle. And this is what the whole party in its conference adopted with a huge majority and says this is the politics of the Linke Party and rejected the attack of Sarah Wagenknecht. For me, it's important to show that we have a massive shift to the right in society, but there's also a polarization. And I think it's key for us to influence the political balance of forces in society and also in the party by building the movement against racism. And so we did it when we mobilized to Berlin. We did it when we mobilized to Augsburg. I just want to explain how we were able to get those 70,000 to Berlin. So we forged an alliance with different groups in it, the trade unions. We had a gays and lesbians organization. We had Muslims organization supporting the call. We had the radical left. We had on the demo speaking parliamentarians of the SPD and the Greens. But what made the difference was the club scene, like the techno clubs, issued their own call and mobilized to a rave. And the theater people calling for a big demonstration at the same day and bringing out thousands of people. I think this shows that there's a huge potential in society that has to be mobilized. And I think this is our job to build in the neighborhoods, in the workplaces, in the schools, in the pubs. So in Augsburg, they produced posters, "No beer for Nazis." And the pubs put it on their doors. And this is why we helped to create, like 2 years ago when we realized what was happening with the AfD, we created, together with many others, an anti-racist campaign, Aufstehen gegen Rassismus, Stand Up to Racism, and we try to organize and to mobilize against every occasion where the AfD is marching, but also rooting the resistance against the AfD and against racism in every locality and every school, every university, every school place. This is a big task because we know the AfD won't just stop existing next year. So they're building, and they have ground on which they can mobilize, because the disillusionment with the politics is so big, and the betrayal people feel. And so I think it's important to build this campaign, to build the movement, and also to fight in the Left Party, that the Left Party maintains an anti-capitalist and anti-racist force we can rely on. I think, to conclude, it's important for us to see the right wing, the Nazis, are very, very well connected. David told that the FPÖ, the Freedom Party people, traveling to Germany to teach the German Nazis. The AfD people are going here to talk to the British Nazis. They are very well connected, and we have to get connected too, as European anti-racist and anti-fascist. And I think it was very good that this year we had a common call at the UN Anti-Racism Day in March, and we mobilized in many countries. And I think we have to develop this further. We have to get connected. We have to exchange our experiences and have to mobilize together. Then we will never again allow the Nazis to take power again, not in Germany and not elsewhere in Europe. Thank you very much.
Okay. And our final speaker is Petros Constantinou, and he's from Kafir, and he's also a councillor in Athens and a member of the Greek Socialist Workers Party.
Okay, comrades. I think it's a very important period to discuss and find the ways to resist the Nazis and the far right and the fascists in Europe. They get support from Trump. They get support from the politics that he's pushing around the world, the economic protectionism and nationalism. This in Europe doesn't mean the European first. That means that every state and every government is pushing for this agenda. So we have to be clear that it is a big fight that it is opening. The far right is rising, and they have this kind of support. So it's a big challenge for the revolutionaries and for the movement to respond to this big challenge. I don't say that we have the fascists there on power, or Donald Trump is already there and the fascists won. But it is a process that we have to respond very quickly. So what's happening in Greece with the neo-Nazis of Golden Dawn? Just 10 days before, they went to the parliament and they called for a military coup. That was their answer. When Alexis Tsipras and the Syriza party, they had an agreement with the Republic of Macedonia. They agreed that this state should change their name and call themselves North Macedonia. They should change their constitution in order to be allowed to get in NATO. This was an agreement that was made by Alexis Tsipras. And the right wing and the nationalists are coming against this agreement by shouting and by mobilizing on the street. They even attacked the mayor of Thessaloniki just week, and they tried to build nationalism. They tried to stop the radicalization of the workers' movement and workers' resistance. They tried to shift all this thing and to blame that the responsibility that lies on what is wrong is refugees, is the migrant, is the left, is the workers' resistance. So it's a big fight there, and it is impressive that people, they responded to that. The outcry about what happened, it's very important because it is connected that the Golden Dawn is not on the, now it's not on the advance, but it is already in crisis. It's 3 years now, they're gone on a trial. They are losing, they lost 2 MPs, they lost 1 European MP. Their offices, there were 60 offices around Greece, and now there are 11. So they are on the retreat and they are on the split. They are under the pressure of the movement. But the reality is that this is not the end of the story. And even their leader of the Golden Dawn says 2 things why we have problems. And he was addressing his members why we don't develop in Greece and take the momentum of what's happening in Europe with the far right and why we can not win from Trump. And he said for two reasons. One is the trial, because we are stuck in a trial and we have to prove that we are a legal party there and to avoid the contamination, which is coming. And the second thing, they said that every time that we try to do something, the anti-fascists are there, canceling our meetings. So this is what had happened all the previous years, and how we came in a position that during the trial of the Golden Dawn, the witnesses were the victims of their attacks. The witnesses were the left. They were the revolutionaries. They were the anti-fascists. 120 of them, they went to the trial condemning the Golden Dawn. So they are on the defense there, and it's very clear. But this happened because of the development of a huge movement. When in 2013, they took the step that from the parliament and how they got 77%, we go to control the neighborhoods by squads, by violence. And they murder a musician, and they attack the trade unionists. The response was huge. There was a general strike. There was a demonstration of 60,000 who marched to their headquarters, and then the government was forced to go for a crackdown against them. The whole of the parliamentary group ended in jail, in prison, for 6 months, for 12 months, and so on. That's how there was a stop on them. And also when they try to exploit the fact that 1 million refugees, they came in Greece and tried to build against the refugees, they were defeated. They tried to say, we don't want the school kids of the refugees to go to the public schools. And they tried to attract the parents and some locals against the refugees. They were defeated because the trade unions, the teachers, the local activists, they mobilized, and they really forced even the government to go more quickly to that. So in 6 months' time, all the refuge of the children, they were there. The school kids were inside, and the fascists were out and away from this. And they lost with this campaign. So it's very important that we have the trial, and our main slogan is put all of them in the prison before the trial comes to the final outcome. So this is a big campaign. However, it is not enough to stand up against fascism by creating all this mass movement. The big challenge is to relate with the fight against racism. Because even if they are in the retreat, what is happening with Trump, what's happening in Europe, it gives them new breath, new space. And what happened just a week ago, it's a big boost for the fascists and the far right everywhere. The agreement between the European leaders, pushed by Angela Merkel, to come to an agreement where they say we will close the border in the Mediterranean Sea, a Mediterranean Sea that it is a grave. 30,000 refugees were drowned there. They lost their lives. And they say we will close that border. We will create concentration camps outside and inside the Europe. The refugees cannot apply for asylum on the European soil. This is a big change that they are moving. Practically, they are compromising with the far right, and then the far right comes and says, this is not enough. We need more. So they're pushing much more for their racist agenda. And it is very clear, and it is very unfortunate that Alexis Tsipras and the Syriza government, they capitulated to this. It is the other face of what they did with the memorandum and with austerity. They signed this agreement, which leads to more death. So we have to open the fight against racism. We have to demand, open the border. We have to fight all the racist arguments coming from the far right and the fascist, because the main target is the workers' resistance. They want to blame the migrants for the austerity, for the psyche of the people, for the bad conditions in the health service. For every reason, there is some scapegoat, and it is the Muslim, it is the migrant. So we have to respond to these challenges and support the fight for the open borders, to say no to the fortress Europe, and to say very openly that for the unemployment, we have to blame the bosses and the governments who are sacking. For the bad conditions in the National Health Service, it's all who are cutting, and they don't bring more doctors and nurses in the system. For the pensions, we have to condemn the governments and for the austerity, but also to demand the legalization of the migrants, because they will give more money and more power to the social security system. So I think, and also we have to insist that this militarization in the border costs for the working class. They have to pay for this. They have to pay for all these warships, for the inspection of the border. They have to pay for the Frontex, for 10,000 who will be the guard of the border. For us, it is a shame that Alexis Tsipras decided to be the border guard for the European Union. What we need is to open the border, and this is what we're going to fight for the next period. And also, we have to oppose the competition that are creating between the different powers. Alexis Tsipras said that this agreement with Macedonia, it's about to having a hegemonic role in the Balkans. And this brings more competition with Turkey. This brings more competition of who is controlling the new gas reserves at the south of Cyprus. And it's a shame that they are now going with an agreement between Greece, Egypt, Israel, and Cyprus. All this brings the danger of a war there. So the refugees will be on the target. The Muslims will be on the target. This is where Islamophobia has their own base. So the real question is how to fight them, how to resist. And it is very important to have a united front tactic, to bring all the left, all the trade unions, to mobilize them, and to have a common fight in that. And it is possible to win the heart and the minds of the people. So the role of the revolutionaries in this period is very crucial. During the 30s, the Trotskyists and the revolutionaries were just a few, and they could make the proposal for the united front. But we can build the united front, not only in our countries, but internationally. This is a big possibility to fight and stop the fascists in the next period. And it is very important that as we build the anti-racist and the anti-fascist movement, we build the left alternative. In Greece, it's very important that we have the Syriza government, the government there, and in order to build hope and not on desperation and not to leave open the space for the fascists, is very important to be based on the workers' struggle, on the workers' resistance, to fight against the bosses of Europe, to fight against the bankers, to fight against the militarists, the racists, and so on. So by building this alternative, we're building hope, we can win the best militants in the working class movement, in the activists in the solidarity movement, and of course in the refugees and the new migrants who are coming with their experiences of Syrian revolution on the resistance in their countries, to build this force in order to stop fascism. We can do it from our side. We have on the 15th of September a huge demonstration with the slogan, "The Nazis in the prison, open the borders for the refugees." And also we have on 13th of October an international meeting against racism and fascism. And we are very happy that Aussteigen gegen Rassismus has their own conference on the 30th of August and 1st of September, and Stand Up to Racism on 20th of October. There are real possibilities to build this movement, to coordinate this movement, smash the racism, and open the gates of Fortress Europe. Fight the Nazis, open the border for the refugees.
Thanks very much for that. And obviously we've got some time for contributions from the floor. As I said earlier, it will be 3 minutes each. If I can ask people to be disciplined, we've got already a lot of hands going up. After 2 minutes, I'm going to tap my mic to let people know that they're going to sum up. So I'm going to take yourself first, and then I'm going to take you. If you'd like to come to the front.
Hello. I just want to make a short information point about Belgium, because there is no doubt that this whole whole wave of far-right policies and fascism and racism and anti-refugees is very present in Belgium too, although there is at the moment not a lot of talk about the fascist parties who were Vlaams Belang and Front National. There is not much talk of them, but there is wide recognition that our government is a far-right government with Bart de Wever and Theo Franken, who are believed, and I think it's true, to be from Nazi origins, I mean, in their past. And Jan Jambon, who is in charge of the refugees politics, who is really, I think, is interior minister, who is really brutal, instilling brutal policy and way to treat refugees. There is also talk about concentration camps or closed camps. There is brutal police is brutal towards refugees sleeping in the park, etc., etc. So, and this is of course is all to put together and in context with all the bombs attacks that have been in the recent years in Belgium. And all the hate against refugees has had roots in that in those bombs attacks, but it is also to put into context with a lot of strikes that have been going on and a lot of social unrest and protest that have been going on. I won't give you the details, but right now there is a strike movement among the rail workers in Belgium. And there is one special thing that I want to mention is that there has been a fantastic and incredible reaction from the citizens of Brussels with a platform called Plateforme Hébergement Citoyen. Citizens, apparently not necessarily politicized or anything, decided that they would not let the refugees sleep in the streets during the night and took them in their homes, and they organized a beautiful, well-organized platform to host refugees in their homes and help them preserve their rights and even try to help them get where they wanted to be. And these people are being criminalized by the government, who treat them as passeurs, as if they would make well, you understand what I mean, passeur. And I think this is absolutely great, and there is a huge potential, I think, to make it short in Belgium, to have a mass movement against these fascist practices, these right-wing policies. But I'm afraid there is not at the moment, but there is a huge potential for it. So that's all I can say for the moment.
And then I've got the comment over there.
Yeah,
and then I'm going to have the comment.
I wanted to say something about, I think in the Netherlands you can see what happens when you don't have a left which is principled on anti-racism and is really fighting the far right wherever it rears its head. For 10 years we had the gradual normalizations of the racism through Wilders. He shifted the terrain further to the right. The left was not fighting. The left was saying things like, well, we shouldn't protest people, our colleague parliamentarians on the street. We should fight them in parliament, that's it. But we shouldn't go to the street. And what we now have in the Netherlands is two different far-right parties. One, the party of Wilders, which is not really a party. He's the only member. He's not organizing anything. He's twittering all the time. And we have a much more dangerous party, which is Forum for Democracy, which is really building a party. It has a fascist ideology at its core, and it's building its cadres. Some people have argued this means a fragmentation of the right. But we see it only creates the competition between these different parties on the right and even drives it more further to the right. So one example is Geert Wilders joining the Nazis here in London a few weeks ago. It's through this competition that he's also forced to look more towards the street, and he's not afraid anymore to connect with outright Nazis. I think it's also important to note the international connections on the far right. Forum for Democracy, the party, is really looking towards the alt-right and borrowing their ideas. It's really looking towards the Nouvelle Droite in France, the AfD in Germany. So they're really taking elements of these different far-right parties and getting inspired by it and trying to build something on it. And this party really is, you know, it's not yet a fascist party, but their ideas are fascist. They're building the cadres, and they're normalizing ideas like the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory, which is also popular in other countries. They're saying things like we want to have a dominantly white Europe. So they're really shifting the terrain from Islamophobia and the hatred of Muslims also towards normalizing these racial theories again. So what do we do? In the Netherlands, there's two things we're really involved in. And first, it's trying to rip the respectable face of this new fascist party. So being very strong on what kind of tradition they're in, and to argue with people about not underestimating the danger of this new party. The other thing is we're building protests. We're building together with the left elements of the different left parties, the Greens, the Socialist Party, the unions, we're trying to build protest. One big success was the demonstration the 18th of March in Amsterdam, where we got 3,000 people on the street, despite a far-right campaign aimed at dividing the coalition, building the demonstration. Some left parties left, but the attendance really showed that the support for this anti-racist position is much bigger than these left parties are taking seriously. So this is really what we need to build on, and trying to bring these different parts of the left together in the fight against the far right and the fascists.
Hello, comrades. I'm Lucas. I'm a member of Die Linke, as Christina, and also of Marx 21, the sister organization in Germany. And I want to share some experiences from our work against the fascists on the ground. As you all have heard from Christina, the AfD made huge gains in the last general elections in Germany in September last year. But this was not true in every part of Germany. We have a 5% threshold to enter the parliament for every party. And there was one city in the country where the AfD didn't manage to get past this threshold. And this was the city of Münster, where I come from. And I want to share... Thanks. And I want to share the experience of our fight against them in this town and in the branch of Die Linke there. So basically, how did we achieve this? We did two things. The one thing was that we tried to build a visible, anti-racist, anti-capitalist alternative so that the void that is left by the collapse of the Social Democratic Party is not filled by the Nazis. This is not a given, well, because we work within the reformist left party, so we had to do our own style of politics, basically, but we were able to do this in our city. The second and very important point is that we built years ago, or over the last years, we built a broad coalition of unions, of anti-fascist organizations, of the members of the Social Democratic parties, members of the Green Party, and members of the Left Party, and we mobilized against the racists whenever they tried to get out and spread their hate to the public. And one very big example of this was that I think last year, it was in the beginning of last year, they had the head of their party, back then it was Frau Petri, and they wanted her to give a talk in Münster. What happened was that we made a big campaign, and we managed to mobilize 10,000 people in a city of 300,000 citizens to push her back and to make this a disaster for them. It ended up really demoralizing them. And this is very important. We try to not normalize them, but isolate them in the first point and demoralize them secondly. And the isolation part really worked out well. They had really big problems finding a locality for giving talks, public talks and everything, because many pub owners or owners of localities withdrew from contracts with them because the pressure of the public was so big. And also, they are very demoralized by this. There was a statement from one AfD official in 2017 when he was asked about the protests at their rallies. And he said, "Oh, well, we're so used to it by now, we can't even really be angry about it anymore. Because every time they tried to show up in public, we were there as well, and we protested against them, and we didn't let them have their way." And this is the key, I think, to stopping them.
Hi, I'm Marina from Barcelona, from Unite Against Fascism and Racism. 1 month ago, the Muslim community of my neighborhood opened a mosque. So after 3 attempts, they have achieved, so they have won, because the fascist groups of our neighborhood were organizing a lot of demonstrations against the Muslim community, against the mosque. And, for example, they attacked the mosque 3 times. They tried to burn it. They also threatened a Muslim friend. They said, we are going to burn your mosque, and with you inside, with your mother and your grandmother inside. But we organized bigger demonstrations. We organized an iftar, a Muslim celebration, in a big square of the neighborhood. We built a lot of solidarity between the neighborhoods, Muslims, Jewish, Catholics, doesn't matter. And now we win because the mosque is opened. We achieved this goal because we work together, because we want a neighborhood without racism and fascism. Now we are going to start another campaign to involve more neighbors in this topic. So we have designed a lot of banners to give to every neighbor to put in their windows and in their balcony. We want to organize a big concert that music yes and fascism and racism no. And our slogan is no barriers for all. No barriers is the neighborhood. No barriers for all. We want a neighborhood without racism and fascism. So thank you.
Yeah, comrades, I think fighting for an interpretation about the rise in racism at the moment is crucial. What happened in London, which the comrade from the Netherlands alluded to, with Geert Wilders speaking, 15,000 Nazis marched through central London. But you see, what was interesting, I was speaking to comrade about it, and they had a funny interpretation of it as an internationalist, nationalist demonstration, which I thought was very interesting and actually quite real. The fact that you had Geert Wilders, representatives of the Front National, Jobbik, etc. You know, a letter from Steve Bannon and stuff like that, the mastermind of the alt-right strategy. And you see, actually, I think what is emerging before our eyes is a pan-European movement where absolutely the refugee crisis is put to the centre. Because what is the reason that the European ruling classes say for the lowest living standards in Europe since the records began? It is absolutely that black and brown people are laying siege to the continent. And more than that, that black and brown people are laying siege to the European way of life and identity. And you see, that is terrifying when you think about it like that, comrades. But you see, it was interesting. When I was speaking to another comrade about that demonstration, he said, you have to be careful. They aren't Mosley in the back shirts. They aren't in the uniforms. They aren't in the SS uniforms. But you see, actually, I think they were in uniforms, comrades. They had sharp haircuts. They had sunglasses, suits, and a camera phone. That is the uniform of the new alt-right. This is the fascism emerging, developing before our eyes. And you see, I think what's important when we talk about the freedom of speech question with the racists, I think actually is this is what they are pushing absolutely to the fore at the moment. And see, we cannot be defensive about it. What does freedom of speech mean for Tommy Robinson supporters? When they marched in Leeds, a mosque was firebombed. A Sikh Gurdwara was firebombed also. You know, we have to call this out for what it is. It isn't freedom of speech, this is hate speech, comrades. And we have a right to be on the streets against these people defending those communities. But you see, the final thing that I'll say is that we cannot separate the question of racism from the system that we live under. It isn't a coincidence that we're in the longest economic crisis since the 1930s, and like the 1930s, racism and fascism is now a viable political alternative for millions across the world. I don't believe that people are born with racist ideas. If you don't have any money in your pockets, who is it easier to blame? Your Muslim neighbour or your black neighbour, or actually those bankers, those bastard bankers who take us into economic crisis after economic crisis and still get their bonuses promises for it, by the way. You see, this is what we have to say. This has to be our answer. Because actually, we can't talk about the symptoms. You know, in my opinion, capitalism is a disease. But you can't deal with the symptoms like racism, sexism, homophobia without getting rid of the disease itself. And that's what we in the SWP are committed to. We want to overturn a system that is absolutely based on profit maximising for the uber rich at the expense of any sort of livelihood for ordinary people. So I would urge people, if you want to be part of that project and dig up this brutal system at its roots, join us.
And while the next speaker comes, there was a sister. Yeah. Now, I'm going to say there's at least another 20 hands of people that want to speak. I've literally only got room for another 2 or 3. So I'm going to apologise to everybody that's not going to get called. So I've got the comrade here, then I've got the sister that's just got up, and then I'm going to call Weyman. I'm going to say, sorry, I really do need to just... So don't feel free that you have to take all 3 minutes.
I mean, I'll take my hat off to the speakers and what they represent, because particularly in Germany the other day, when you had the 70,000 march, the 70,000 carnival of resistance, really, like people on the boats and all of that, it really gave a lot of, I think it gave a lot of us in Britain and elsewhere a real boost because we had what we haven't had for a number of years. We had the far right on the streets, back, confident, up for it again. We haven't had that for several years. We've had it relatively, inverted commas, comfortable in that sense. And I think Germany particularly, but elsewhere as well, really shows an example. And it's no surprise the likes of UKIP are wetting their pants of what the AFD have been able to do, because UKIP started like the AFD did as primarily an anti-EU project with a few fascists in it and so on. They're very, very small at the moment, but we know potentially what they could be. There's a man who some people may remember called Maurice Ludmer, who helped found a magazine called Searchlight, which is still going, and he said a thing about we have to turn anti-racists into anti-fascists and vice versa. I think that still holds true to a degree. There's many a person who's in Stand Up to Racism, for instance, who as yet, but I think there will be, given the big tests we've got, will be on the streets at the weekend against Trump, against the far right on the Saturday after, the day after. I think that's really our job, and I think it's a real test on all of us, me, everyone else in Britain. We face a big test now, but I think it's a challenge we can pass. And you think about it in terms of what Petros said about creating pressure on Golden Dawn, because those fucking scum feel demoralised and feel the pressure of the mass movement, and that's clearly our role here as well. I think we can do it for various reasons. I think the other thing is as well about the conference, people have talked rightly about the international nature of those people, that the other side, crisscrossing the continent and going and meeting each other, trying to talk through best experience, to use a bad phrase, but you know what I mean, using their internationalism. We're clearly using our internationalism. On the 20th of October, it will be, I think, a day, who knows what the situation will be, given Trump, given the far right and so on. But given the resistance that's there, we can, what the 43 group was a great anti-fascist group in this country used to do, they discussed, they decided, and they did it. And we can do that on the 20th and obviously in the days ahead.
Hi, I have 2 questions actually. One is I was reading the Socialist Worker, and it talks about uniting the people against Trump, and you can tell I'm from America. So there's another political force in America that talks about the same thing. It's the Democratic Party, which is a capitalist party. Everybody around the world knows that under Barack Obama, being a black person and walking down the street in America was a crime punishable by death, by execution in the street, by the police. Obama set a world record in deportations. He instituted all kinds of anti-union laws that never existed before in the United States. So my question for you is this. You have all of this Trump material in your newspaper, but you say nothing about the Democratic Party. That does not seem to me to be a united front. That is a popular front where you are subordinating the interests of the working class to an alliance with the bourgeoisie. I also have a question about Tommy Robinson, your speaker here today.
Can you speak closer to the mic?
Yes, thank you. Your speaker today, and also your newspaper talked about exposing the ideas of the fascists, but fascism is not about ideas. It's organized violence against the oppressed, which will ultimately be targeted against the working class. What is urgently needed in Britain and other countries is a mobilization of organized power of the working class to sweep the fascists off the streets. So Stand Up to Racism is building a protest against Tommy Robinson this coming weekend, and a number number of the union bureaucrats have signed on and endorsed that protest. That happened the last time, too. For example, the RMT union called out on their members to come out, but only as atomized individuals. That means that those protests, just like the 1978 Rock Against Racism protest, were premised on expecting the cops, the capitalist state, to defend the protest. And your Greek comrade here today called for the capitalist jails to imprison the fascists. This is sowing dangerous illusions in the working class that the capitalist state, which is an instrument of organized repression against the workers, can be relied on as an ally to fight the fascists who will ultimately be mobilized by the capitalist class for the same ends. We in the Spartacist League counterpose to this the program of organized union contingents to sweep the fascists off the streets, not just to stop the fascists, but to transform the political consciousness of the working class and make them aware of their revolutionary capacity based on their social power and who their friends are and who their enemies are.
Comrade.
Okay, thanks the comrade who let me speak at his place. So I come from France, and I would like to enlighten a little bit our discussion about what's happening actually in France. So comrade spoke about the difficulties to name fascism today in Europe, and I think this is a very big problem in France. We have this party, Front National, which exists since 40 years, which is a federation of all what French counts as fascists, who never changed. And today it's a party which had 11 million votes on the last election. It's today not a real mass party, but a mass electoral party, which could, in the future, implant and become a real danger, a real threat, as a fascist party who wants the power and who has the possibility in the national context, in the European context, to win positions. And so for that, we see for the last month, after the electoral sequence, big change in the implantation of the far-right fascist groups. For example, I come from Strasbourg. We have now some groups, fascist groups. Their name is Bastion Social. They're inspired by Casa Pound in Italy. They're inspired by the Golden Dawn in Greece. They are inspired by the AfD in Germany. And they try to implant in the town. They try to occupy our neighborhood, as well as they try to block the borders, as well as they try to occupy and to expulse migrants in the Mediterranean. And so that's a real problem. And we have to fight it at the local scale, national scale, European scale. And I think that is the point if we want to build something really global against fascism, but as well against racism and in solidarity with migrants. And I think these two questions, anti-racism, anti-fascism, when we as militants intervene on one or the other question, we have to make the link. We have to convince politically of the need to link these two questions. And I think the fact to be an anti-racist in the anti-fascist movement and to be an anti-fascist in the anti-racist movement is one condition to build something global and to build something victorious against the fascists and the racists.
Thank you so much.
Comrades, I actually wasn't going to speak, but I couldn't let it go about the seriousness of the situation. There's no time for slogans, actually. We're going to fight, I was going to say that understanding what people have said up on the front is incredibly important to us. It's not an accident that when you look over the last 2 years of all the struggles that have taken place against racism and fascism, that you find that it's many of the organisations that are sitting on the table that have done that. And the reason why I think that's important is because when we talk about a movement that can grow up now, the anti-racist movement, the anti-fascist movement is a sleeping giant. It's something that can grow and build, and you have to get it the right way round. I think it's brilliant, the analysis that they've put forward. There's a difference between the state racism. Don't forget that it was Angela Merkel and David Cameron that said that multiculturalism doesn't work in 2011 inside inside Munich. They started a fire they couldn't put out, and what they've got is they opened the door to far-right, to racist populists who've actually turned around and benefited. It's not an accident that in Paris, the National Front, in Berlin, you've got the growth of the AfD, in Athens, in all the major centres of capitalist, and Vienna, of capitalist accumulation, there's a crisis in the neoliberal state and they haven't got an answer to it. They've opened up the door in terms of the growth of the far-right as populists. But for us, we're not fatalists. The people up in here, the truth is that when you look at the working class in all those countries, you know what's amazing? I've been privileged to go to all those meetings. They're multicultural, they're multiracial. I tell you the danger of a liberal state. When you see Viktor Orban talk about the growth of multicultural society. Actually, Hungary's not that multicultural. But you go to the car factories in Berlin or anywhere else, they're absolutely multicultural. And if somebody turns around and says, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to organise to destroy you, actually, we talk about revolution and change. A revolution will come about within a struggle against the growth of austerity. But I tell you, the other thing that could happen is that these states that start to weaken, people will turn around and fight back. That's our history. 1934, look what the French workers. In 1934, look what happened inside France. It detonated a bigger struggle. We're in a period of instability and change. We are not going to give in to fatalism. It's true that we have seen the growth of far-right and racists and Nazis, but it's also an opportunity. The Nazis are raising the stakes about what type of society that we want. Socialists at the centre of it. I'm so proud that every time people talk about resistance, that at the heart of it is international socialism. For us, the Nazis are a union of international despair. What's amazing is that sometimes people don't know this. When they get together, they keep fighting. You know, even so accidentally, at the end of it, they have a drink and they fight. That won't happen at Marxism. Right? Because at the heart of our question is a question of internationalism, about where we talk about the liberation of humanity, of that change. That's what's at stake. It is true it's socialism or barbarism, but we've got analysis, we've got organisation, we have a theory of the united front, and we have internationalism. And that's what we have to fight for. But at the heart of that, there has to be socialist. I know all these comrades for many years, and I'll tell you one thing that I know, why I know them, because they're revolutionary socialists. They don't give an inch to the question of racism, but they're flexible to work with other people that don't agree with them. They have a strategy. They have a theory about how to change the world. That's the heart of the change that will defeat the fascist, but it's also one that will fight for a better society.
Okay. Petra's going to just say 2 minutes, everybody. Let you to do it last.
Okay. Thank you very much, Weyman, for your very good words about the movement that we represent. But I want to remind to everybody that we are also students of a big tradition of fighting fascism and racism internationally. This is the tradition of Anti-Nazi League. And I will never forget Julie Watterson when she was speaking about these lessons in the street of Prague, and to all of us. So we have to pay honor for all this keeping of the tradition coming from the 30s, coming from Leon Trotsky, but also giving big examples of how we fight and how we can win. I mean, without this kind of examples, without the inspiration, what happened the last time, we couldn't have all of this strength and the courage to go on. So what's important in this period is, I think, one point that we have the crisis in Europe. We have the political crisis and the collapse of the neoliberal and also the social democratic parties. We have Trump. And in this situation, there's an argument that if you want to avoid the far right, you have to adapt to racism. This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. If you want to fight fascism, you have to fight racism. This is the lesson from the 30s. Why they lost. So, for us, it's extremely important to win the trade unions, to win the social democratic, to win the left, the center-left parties to this kind of policy. So it is extremely important to win the trade unions, to call for the demonstration. We give our soul in the workplaces, in the neighborhoods, to have the cover of the trade unions calling for demonstrations, and also for strikes, because if you try to find which is the most powerful way to stop them, is to stop the work. This is the threat to the capitalists. If they are under threat that they will lose their profits, they will be scared. So the unity of the anti-racist and of the anti-fascist with the working class movement, with the working class strategy. It's at the heart of the revolutionary politics, and we have to stay firm on that. We are optimistic, but at the same time, we're watching the threat. We're very optimistic that the lessons of the 30s and our experience and our political traditions give us the instruments, give us the way to build an international movement and to smash fascism.
Yeah, thank you for all the contributions that show that, like, socialists among Europe and internationally are doing the same thing, fighting racism and fighting the Nazis under very different circumstances. So I think it's important to mention racism is a hell for the people who are victims of racism. And we are knowing that every day in Europe, in Germany, in other countries, refugees and Muslims and migrants are harassed because of their color, because of their belief, because of their origins. But racism is also an attack on us all, on all of us. It's an attack on a society which is founded on solidarity. And so I think it's important to understand, to gain social justice and to fight against global capitalism, we need anti-racism. We can't divide the two things from another. And so it's so important to prioritize the fight against racism for socialists wherever you are. And so I'm very confident that your mobilization against Trump on Friday and against the Nazis on Saturday will be a success. And we will reflect this, and we will look at your demonstrations, and there will be a motivation for us, because we have big fights to fight in the future. We have migrants demonstrations in September. We have the European elections for those who are in the EU, which will be, the Nazis will take on this to have a big mobilization, like in international nationalist mobilization. We have important elections next year in different federal states in the east of Germany, where we are afraid that there could happen to have a government between conservatives and the fascists and the AfD. And so I think it's very important to keep informed, to fight together. As I said before, the Nazis and the far right, they are organized internationally. We have to do the same. And so I wish all the best to all of you in Barcelona, in France, in Belgium, and next weekend in London. So we all together are part and parcel of a so important European movement, and we will stop the Nazis wherever they occur.
Comrades, it's so important, as Christina said, that we have this kind of meetings to share our experiences and to discuss strategy and tactics, how we fight the Nazis. Now, after the Holocaust, after 6 million Jews got exterminated, the high-ranking officials of the Freedom Party in Austria are singing in their songbooks, in the student corporations, they are singing of murdering the 7th million, the next million Jews. We have to fight the Nazis now. We have to fight racism now until they got a massive street movement, until they get stronger. And we can beat them. We can beat them. We heard about a lot of tensions inside the fascist organizations, inside the right-wing organizations. There is a poll in Austria saying that 59% would support a strike against the right-wing government, against the fascist government. Nearly 2/3 would support that strike. There are a lot of tensions in the Freedom Party. The Freedom Party tries to introduce the 12-hour working day, as I said. They gave in when the free trade agreement of CETA was agreed on. And they experience all of this pressure, and we can use this against the Nazis. But if we don't fight racism, because they use racism to let them off the hook what they're doing. Attacks on the working class, and so on. So the fight against racism should be at the heart of our struggle. In the end, I want to ask you to send Heinz-Christian Strache a message. I will film this, and we will post it. So, I think it works. Yes. So, from Marxism 2018 to the Vice Chancellor of Austria, Heinz-Christian Strache, we say, Fuck Strache! Once again, 1, 2, 3, Fuck Strache! Thank you.